Ladies and gentlemen, this is internet personality Vangelus, and there was a transformer I wanted all throughout my childhood. And then in my teenage years, as chances came and went, I lost the taste. Then the taste came back. Then I lost it. Then it came back, partly thanks to an overstock sales competition between Big Bad Toy Store and TF Source. This is the Encore reissue of Fortress Maximus, the tallest G1 transformer, and still the beefiest transformer ever made to date. As of this recording. I was in slightly smiling disbelief when it was announced that Takara Tomy would be re-releasing this monster, and I am so very glad that they did. All things begin somewhere, and with Fortress Maximus, they begin all the way down here. This is Spike, or Fortress, depending on your localization. He's your classic basic headmaster with a broad chest, fused knees, and loads of armor plating to cubify the silhouettes of his limbs. He has one silver paint app to pick out his teeny little face, and some cool rocket thruster sculpting on his wrists and heels that offers a glimpse into the idea that this guy may actually be able to do things by himself. As far as posability goes, he's got simple swivels at his shoulders, hips, and knees. Unfortunately, his legs are fused at the knees, so the thighs are always moving in tandem. But he's a headmaster, so who's his body slave? Why, it's Cerebros, the soft gray pacifist Autobot of the nondescript alt mode. He looks a little funny, mostly because his body's overall a bit smaller than the usual ones that receive this style of headmaster. It makes his skull look a tad inflated. His stickers add some desperately needed spots of color to an otherwise bland palette, and his on-chest power readings are Maximus-ized. Cerebros also comes with a gun, and in Japan, he naturally also wields a small master sword, which is dying for any kind of additional color on its black plastic surface. He can chop or aim with his simple shoulder swivels and gets a little ahead of his time with solid universal hip joints. Thanks to his huge heels, he can keep his balance pretty well despite the large blob of technology on his back. Cerebros transforms into a sort of thing. You can plug him into the Fortress Maximus City mode. It serves as a sort of thing building or thing block. Honestly, he does blend in pretty well amidst all the other semi-realized greeblage. Standing one head shorter at Cerebros' side as a rather excellent partner robot is Cog, whose color palette is so much more interesting. There's blue! He's got a cool look, a sturdy faceplate, and an incredibly confusing character concept. Aside from carrying a little gun and swiveling at his shoulders, he looks like he has one hell of a story to tell, and could answer questions deeper than anyone would ever expect. But nobody cares about his opinions, just the way he splits apart and reforms into a pair of vehicles called Gasket and Grommet. Why do they have separate names? Are they characters too? Once again, nobody seems to care. But Grommet sure can roll around on its implied tank treads and physical mini-wheels. Gasket's got more substantial wheels, bigger guns, and a central divot that lets any headmaster sit on board as though it were the best battle wheelchair on Cybertron. One could also sit on board Grommet, though that looks more like a child playing in a radio flyer wagon. But hey, internalized crossplay is internalized crossplay. And there's no internalized crossplay like being a friggin' playset. Fortress Maximus is the greatest of the city formers, and his city mode is the key to his success. It is an imposing metropolis from any angle, yet surprisingly compact given how large this guy becomes when he stands up. The rear blocks and forward ramp arrays would be for naught if they weren't all brought together by the central tower. The color palette runs real smooth, with industrial grays, blue structures, and slightly over-noticeably red bits and pieces whose rednesses are just red enough to grab your eyes a little too heavily and redly. But man, the sculpting, it's everywhere! Smooth surfaces are what one might expect out of a giant toy from the post-movie G1 heyday, but Fortmax has implied function or straight-up technological texturing all over his framework. The paintwork is nearly non-existent, but the sticker work is copious. There are a lot of big, fat labels slapped all over this fella in his city mode alone, and they're very much needed to finish the visual package that the city's size and shape began. But what's a city without function? Not the city of Maximus. To start off, the highly suspicious red over-ramps on the white, normal ramps are also a very simple means of propelling wheeled vehicles forward and down the aforementioned ramps, the normal ones. It's deadly simple and entirely based on physics, but damn if this isn't fun to do even in 2013. Moving to the back end of town, there's a big blue staircase that can fold down to reveal a small gray crawl space. On the other side, there's a small red staircase that folds down to reveal a small red jail cell. Both of these things basically take the otherwise hollow spaces in Maximus's shins and fit them for storage. It's a cool idea, I just wish the spaces were a bit deeper. Also, being in jail in a giant robot's left leg must suck. Center front and at the foot of the main tower, there's a little red radar array connected to a little red plug, which is actually connected to a little red wheel. You can spin that wheel to spin the radar. Conversely, you can spin that radar to spin the wheel. Whee! The final gimmick is a really lovely little combination of an elevator with a ramp launcher. There's a ground-level central cavity containing a suspicious red ramp. Get a car in there and head around back. Turn the crank and the ramp elevates. Once it's reached the top floor, if you hit the red switch just outside, the ramp will pop up and, hopefully, launch the occupant out and down the central city ramp. Now, I love this gimmick, but it has one major limitation. The space is cramped! It's hard to naturally drive a vehicle in there, so you kind of have to stuff it in out of character. And they've got to be within a very tight bounding box to play nice with what's going on. All things said, this city mode's not without its flaws. There are two that stick out to me the most. First up, from behind, looks kind of flat. There's a big suspicious-looking spaceship cockpit just begging you to ignore it. And even though they're technically parking spaces for vehicles, the twin foot cavities don't do enough to cover for the lack of play pattern back here. Something I only bring up because the other three sides of this box have got things to do in this mode. The second downer for me is that helipad. There's often going to be a large gun hanging over top of it. Kinda gets in the way of it being a helipad, you know? In transforming to robot mode, Fortress Maximus basically stands up. But man, he does it with a panache lost to toys even decades older. After all the ramps are folded up, the legs of Maximus unfurl, revealing just how tightly they've coiled up in their city form configuration. And man, their ratchets are even tighter and like big boy strong. I can't fathom having tried to play with this as a little kid, but with my noodly little kid arms. There are a bunch of much less muscular folding panels and things, which make me think of all the flippity bits on the 86 movie's Autobots City. And while all those little offhangs clean themselves up, Cerebros makes a graceful exit to stand by for the end of the transformation. Hopefully nobody attacks him. I mean, this is all really impressive, so Cerebros is probably totally not in the enemy's aggro range. Totally, probably not. As he watches, his titanic superbody's phallic spire splits down the middle and folds away, using some terrifyingly thin friction clips to lock in place. Terrifyingly thin friction clips are kind of a common thing on Max, and even though this Encore was produced recently, I worry about them. The arms are a simple affair, partly because, let's be honest, they were barely hiding in the first place. Folding down the main center ramp pieces, we reveal the final socket, and it's time to double Headmaster! Fortress Maximus stands ready and stands heavy. Standing nearly 2 feet tall, this is the stuff childhood dreams are made of. This was, until recently, the largest Transformer ever made, and by damn it, he's still the chunkiest. What struck me, even as a little kid, is how nicely proportioned he looks. How well he uses all his mass. The broad shoulders, the huge shins and feet, the chiseled pectoral boxes. Fortress Maximus is a super robotic, superheroic Superman through and through. His major visual weakness is the presence of his outer ramps just hanging from his shoulders, though one could pull them off if one were careful in doing so. It's also worth noting that he has a big belly plate of die-cast metal to add to his already girthy weight. That's a try-hard tactic I feel quite okay about. And let me tell you, I know about try-hard tactics. As far as armaments go, yeah, the city-sized robot feels the need to carry weaponry. Fort Max has got a dual laser cannon and a photon rifle, and man, these just feel so unnecessary. Perfectly so. The photon rifle even has a scope sight. When is he ever gonna use that? I love it! But that pales in comparison to Japan's addition to this toy. City-sized firearms? Pah! Give him a city-sized melee weapon. Fortress Maximus can wield the Master Sword, a blade the size of a skyscraper, whose collateral damage is the stuff of men of steel. It's cool to actually have this accessory, given that even in the days of Fortress Maximus being a grail to a younger man-child collector like I once was, the Japanese version felt even more so out of reach. Sadly, there's no integration for this thing in either of Max's other modes, and I really wish there was a peg somewhere to have this as some kind of crazy tower in city mode. As for the rest of the bits and bobs, like guns, radars, or gasket and grommet, there are enough spaces in Max's body to kind of just pile those pieces in and keep them safely stored away. In fact, there have been stories of collectors getting incomplete G1 Fort Maxes, only to find some of those missing parts hidden away inside his various compartments. Even without any of his accessories, Fortress Maximus is still armed and ready to become a standing weapons platform. His forearms and knuckles contain twin cannons, his legs contain bigger twin cannons, and his flanks bear a robot-exclusive payload of the biggest twin cannons. I love this whole setup, as it makes Max's general immobility actually work for me on a fictional level. Like, his robot mode is less of a bipedal humanoid form and more of a means to fire all his guns at the same time in one direction. Alright, so Fortress Maximus, let's start off with the head. It doesn't do anything. This guy is a G1-ass G1 toy made from G1, G1, and G1. However, for a G1 toy, he does have a few surprises, I guess one could say. He's got a big ol' ratcheted shoulder joint. 1 ratchet, 2 ratchets, 3, 4, and you've gone 180 degrees. Yeah, we're gonna do that numerical thing that everyone thinks is so fun. His elbows are also ratcheted. 1, 2. Okay, so there's 2 steps to 90. What's that divided by 2? I'll leave you to do the math. His wrist also can swivel like that, and that's pretty much it from the waist up. But you know what? That's, for a G1 toy, it's okay. Could have used an outward thingamadoo here, but that's, I guess, a little bit ahead of its time, except for the fact that it's happening right down here. Because his other major point of articulation are his legs, and this guy actually has universal hip joints. Huge ones that threaten to knock over my entire filming setup, but it's another 2-step to 90 deal. 1, 2, but these ratchets are so big you can kind of stop things in between ratchets, and it's not too terrible if you're holding on to them. If you let go, then, you know, gravity takes hold. But thanks to the transformation, these things can also go outwards. They can go... there we go. And, what this means is this dude can deliver the biggest high kick that anyone has ever seen, because he is the size of a city. And that means that a city-sized robot is delivering a city-sized high kick. And, well, he also has this, like, sideways knee joint if you want him to look like he's broken his shin. But, why would you want to do that to poor Fort Max? Anyway, he's got... whoa! Universal hips. He's got ratchets in his shoulders and his elbows. And, that's okay for a giant playset that happens to turn into a bipedal robot man. Also, I got to do a posability section on Fortress Maximus. I never thought that would happen. Hooray! Oh yeah. This thing. You can, well, if you were in my position, you'd do it. Fortress Maximus has a third mode, a Battleship mode. It's pretty easy to get him there from his robot mode, as he basically lies down, with the bridge tower closing back up and his feet pointing forward. It's functional, I guess, but it's also way less impressive to me than the shift to his city form. So this is, technically, Fort Max's vehicle mode. It's the Battleship Maximus, and let me say right up front, I don't like it very much. Even as a child, I thought it looked kinda boring, and it doesn't help to now know firsthand just how little Max does to transform into this shape. However, it has a few touches that I do really appreciate. Most obvious would be the little cockpit for the smallest Headmaster body to sit inside. There's a full-on chair and a canopy, and it's translucent, and I really like how it looks in a very tight close-up shot. Also, I do highly appreciate the large array of rolling wheels underneath this mode, playing into the fact that it's supposed to be mobile. The wheels also discourage the doomed idea of trying to fly this thing around a room, something further hobbled by the dangly dual-cannoned box that's sort of just hanging off one side. Max's foot garages get the most use from me here, and this is an impressively long piece for a half-vehicle, half-playset. It's just so much less interesting in visuals, tactile play, and overall engineering than the other facets of this guy. I spent decades of my life wondering what it would be like to have Fortress Maximus as a part of it, and thanks to Takara Tomi's inexplicable decision to do an Encore production run, I know the answer. As a child, I thought this was the coolest toy ever. As I grew up and the taste of G1 grew more dull to my palate, and I saw exactly how this guy worked, I was prepared to simply smile and be impressed at his size and weight from afar. Opening the box and playing with a Fortress Maximus of my own for the first time, I was ecstatic to have had this experience as the finale of my time with city-forming Transformers. Especially after having messed with 2013's new Metroplex, I feel fortunate to have had my first Maximus after that fact. It's given me a huge appreciation for just how much this toy does, and just how well it plays with its mass between its robot and city modes. I dare say that particular conversion remains the best city-to-robot process I have ever seen to date in Transformers, Generations Metroplex included. These two Titan Transformers are fantastic companion pieces, though, with Metroplex being the fast-moving mobile warrior to Fortress's sedentary battle station and weapons platform. But what about you, the Transformers collector who's where I once was, still having never owned a Fortress Maximus? Well, if you get the chance to buy any version of this guy for the kind of price I got at under $250, I think it's worth the plunge. I mean, if you just want the transformation, you'll get a lot of that from Kabaya's DX gum kits, but Fortress Maximus is so much more than the simple steps of his transformation. If you just don't want G1 in your life, then by all means walk away. But I do want to mention that Fort Max makes just as good a Legends and Cyberverse playpiece as he does a G1 centerpiece. And like I said, he's almost made to stand shoulder to shoulder with 2013's Generations Metroplex. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and that's 200 numbered YouTube reviews. Ignoring all the ones with letters appended to the end. I'd sure like to take a little break from giant toys, but once I've had a run of smaller playthings, I know I'll be coming back to the tallest Transformers toy ever made. I just still gotta, do his 5 million stickers.